Yeah, Chaitanya, thank you. Okay, we have next session on connecting the world and cities with the event flows and API interaction by the Franklin. Hey, Franklin,
Hey,
welcome to
hello,
the
Shreya.
stage. Yeah.
Thank you very much. How are you, Shreya? Okay, all right. So today I'll be talking about how the world is getting more and more connected using the APIs and possibly the interactions that are happening with events. So welcome to this year's API Days, Dubai and Middle East edition. My name is Franklin. I work as a solution architect at Digital Dubai. I'm usually involved in integrations and I'm involved in solutions where we move a lot of data between systems. So connecting. So I thought we'll start by a recap on where we are today. So as we know, there's a lot of information that is being produced on the World Wide Web, and we are all the more savvy to be connected and to have that real-time experience. But all of this has been possible today with the advent and growth in the APIs, and therefore I thought we'll start with a quick tribute to the history of APIs. So back in the 1940s to 50s, there were scientists Morris and David who actually contributed to the probably the initiation of APIs, and they brought out something called as punched paper tape that were organized in filing cabinets, and they would replay these paper tapes to kind of give us the feeling of what we have today as an API catalog. Later down in the 60s, the whole concept of an application program interface and as well as a programming interface were introduced to network devices and into databases. And slowly and gradually, the need for standardizing what an API is or giving it a definition came into play. But the most recognizable contribution came in from Roy Fielding in his dissertation back in 2000, where the whole era of REST was laid down, and what is known today popularly as the RESTful APIs. Nevertheless, it's still widely considered that the first API was ever introduced, rather, the first web API was ever introduced by the Salesforce folks in February 2000. So, keeping that in mind, that you have an evolution of around 20 years to have popularly something as a web API, and the need for actually extracting data from the internet has put us in a situation where there are predictions in the year 2025 we'll be generating around 463 exabytes of data worldwide, and that's really huge when it comes to the amount of information produced. And it's also believed that 9 out of 10 people aged above 6 would start to be digitally active. You can just imagine the kind of information that's being generated today is so huge that we can't keep up with it. And this is going to actually explode in the years that is actually to come. And I thought it's also good to refer to the fact that data being not just the new oil, it's still the oil that is actually driving value out of these ecosystems. So, the pedigree of APIs, we have a huge amount of information that's being generated on net. How can we actually pull out this information and use it to our benefits? Guess what? Over the course of the last 20 odd years, we have uh, still the strong contender. We have the REST API that is from the OpenAI specification. Uh, we can never forget our SOAP APIs. It's still defined as a lightweight XML-based protocol. I don't know how far it is lightweight, but definitely it's still here to stay, and it's still in a lot of our legacy systems, in our core banking systems. They are still there, and they still are the bread and butter of all the information that's been extracted. We have the gaining popular GraphQL, which is actually used in devices to solve the overfetching and underfetching problems. And we also have gRPC, which has a niche use where it's mostly used for pulling out as much as performance we can get from when you interact between processes or services. Nevertheless, this landscape, as you can see, there are also other types of API interactions, but the most popularly and commonly used by and I think I can relate to all the previous speakers who have been talking about the need to have openness in terms of the APIs are mostly adopting one of these approaches. And there is a commonality among all these APIs in terms of its usage, and that is typically the request reply fashion in which the APIs are actually used or developed. And This is semantically and easier for people to comprehend, and therefore it is easier for people to troubleshoot. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong in actually using a request reply fashion, and it is going to stay for a lot more time. And the kind of information that we have been generating so far on the on the internet has been able to be managed using this approach of a request reply fashion. But just when we thought that this approach would suffice, guess what? We have more and more, valuable information being produced on the internet, and we have the IoT devices, and we have, lots and lots of devices actually producing information. And the rise of these IoT devices is making it, another value chain for systems and applications to build other ecosystems around it. And therefore it's becoming more and more important that we actually tap into this information and produce other valuable services. So there are predictions in 2025 there are going to be around 30 billion IoT devices, and I think this is probably an understatement. And the advent of Industry Revolution 4 and 5 post the pandemic period is all a catalyst to the kind of events that are being generated in our different domains, be it in the healthcare, be it in the finance, be it in transportation, our home automation systems. All of them are actually producing tremendous amount of information these days, and our typical request reply approach would no longer suffice. Rather, it would complement the situation. Even a harmless coffee cup, I was just recently saying this, a coffee cup is actually connected on the internet, and there is an organization, I think it's called ember.com, that produces or manufactures such coffee cups which can regulate the temperature of your coffee as to your pleasing, and it can actually monitor, and it can actually regulate it however you want it. So that's the kind of information being generated on the different lines of business. And guess what? There is a slightly different pattern of usage that is expected from systems when it comes to these kind of information. And that is actually events, and that's where streaming of such events come into play. And the previous speaker, Chaitanya, was bringing up the usage of an event-driven approach in the ports and shipping industry, and I think that is a recognition of the fact that events are the next evolution when it comes to how systems and value chain is going to actually be built. APIs are there. It's not like they're going to go away, but APIs with the coexistence of events is what is actually going to drive the next decade. So event-driven architecture is here to help us in actually supporting these streaming use cases, and to actually, let's say, standardize and make it interoperable within systems. There is a new kid on the block, and that's, I think most of you would have already started to see and hear about it. It's the Async API. So Async API is a specification. and it's a specification that helps in documenting and describing your asynchronous interactions between different systems. So you had the normal request reply, means of interaction where you had RESTful APIs driven by the Open API specification. You had the Swagger to actually support it. And when it came to the asynchronous fashion, people had different means of actually putting them together. They had their own in-house means to it. But I think the popularization of async API and the adoption of the async API will make it more easier for these systems to gel together and become more effective. Um, so here again, to improve, so we had event-driven architecture has been in place from the time you had, you know, GUI applications, or client thick client applications, which had this push button event click, on button click, or on mouse hover. All of those were actually events being produced by those systems, but they have gained a lot of popularity now when event streaming or streaming use cases have become mainstream, and therefore event-driven architectures and their lessons learned, with the async API specification helping in developers, generating a lot of code. In fact, there are a lot of generators now that are there that can help you generating code, just like how the Swagger was that you would import or use a Swagger to generate your client side or your server side code. Async API would also have generators that allow you to have asynchronous clients and server side code that's generated, and you could start building your asynchronous applications quite quickly. So it's no longer a question about whether you just go the synchronous request reply fashion or you go with the asynchronous, publisher subscriber approach. But it's actually symbiosis of these two systems that actually will drive new value into your organization, whether regardless of the line of business. I'm sure that we just saw an example, or an excellent architecture on how the shipping industry has been tailored to look at the different events that are produced in the system. But definitely, and I'm sure if you look into your organization, there are going to be places where you think, rather than having a request reply fashion, a more synchronous nature would make things real time and valuable for your customers. So there are protocols that support the synchronous approach, and they're commonly known the HTTPS protocol. But when it comes to the sync API, you have the MQP, MQTT gaining popularity from the IoT space, WebSockets, JMS. They all were there, but this is now a more mainstream adoption, and standardization across various technologies. So just like how you had the APIs in your system, internal, systems or your external facing systems, there was an explosion of those APIs. So there were the API portal. Similarly, very soon you'll start seeing gaining popularity when it comes to event portal. So you could have your citizen developers now going to websites or API portals and subscribing for APIs, as well as you could have your citizen developers, or you could have your in-house developers going to something called as an API portal and looking for a certain business event that's being produced, and maybe start building an application around those business events. So event portal is something that's still gaining popularity. It's something that's going to actually become very mainstream, going to be adopted by almost all the organization who want to become very real time and event centric when it comes to their business. Uh, so you would know that all systems and all lines of business are producing events, and the time it takes to actually react to those business, the longer the duration it takes to react to a certain event, the lesser the value you actually generate out of it. So in a typical request reply approach, you would start to go more and more towards the right. But when you have an event centric application, or solutions ground up built in an event driven fashion, then you start to go more and more towards to the left, and gain a lot more value in what you want to actually generate from your particular solution. Uh, I just want to bring into your attention that just as how event-driven architecture has become mainstream, so has been the network. Network has become so ubiquitous that you have now tremendous bandwidth, you have tremendous speed, gaining popularity on 5G, upcoming 6G networks, and even 7G for that matter, is going to keep us connected all the time. Organizations and startups that actually tap into this potential are going to be the next big players in the industry. So what I see, this conversion or this intersection of having a wide ubiquitous network and the need for having a lot of real time value that is going to be built is going to put us in a position where we are going to see an event explosion that's going to actually start. And this is how new startups and entrepreneurs is going to actually tap into this event explosion, and from there derive a lot more value from their already core systems or already existing request reply APIs. So this is a peek into the future, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 15 years from now. This is the kind of experience where event explosion is actually going to be revolving around our lives. And you'll start seeing a real-time economy where uh, probably your GDP and your inflation rates are going to be actually published every day. Yeah, it's actually a pretty strong statement, but I foresee that this is how it's going to actually take place from in the very coming soon actually. Take the case of the retail sector. You would have a better and enhanced experience when it comes to the personal shopping assistance with the stream of indoor location that is available. You'll have a different and renewed experience when it comes to actually working in the retail. Healthcare has tremendous amount of information that is already being produced from various devices, but it hasn't been tapped into yet. And the synergy of having standardization to how the events are actually being emitted and consumed and making events more of a commodity will actually have a lot more entrepreneurs tapping into the space. Of course, the transportation industry has already started in this field. We know how the connected cars have the connected vehicles or the connected experience has been there on the transportation, and you're going to have a different kind of experience already in the transportation field. But it doesn't stop over there. Events are going to become a commodity, and you will start being able to look out into event portals and subscribe to all kinds of events that are being produced, be it maybe a polling sentiment or an seismic feed. All of that would actually become mainstream, and you could just consider, just like you would have a ubiquitous network, you'll start to have something ubiquitous events that are being produced from the various streams. So before I conclude, I just want to share some references on some external reading if you'd like to have a look at it. So Flow Architecture, a great book by this author James. All of what I have been talking about has been driven from what his thoughts are about how the future would look like and how events are going to shape the world. Async API, a great place to have a look at their tools and how they have actually brought in lots of organizations together, understanding that asynchronous mode of operation between systems is going to be mainstream. They have started standardizing the specification. You can now see, connect to a particular WebSocket or JMS or MQP for whatever protocol be for that matter. You'd know that this is the server, this is the payload, this is the documentation around it, and that would be used to actually generate your client code, your server code, and from there you could follow the top-down approach from API to implementation, or you could go from a bottom-up approach from an implementation and have the async API specification generated after that. And finally, All of this streaming is possible with the necessary tools, and there are various streaming solutions that are being built. There are multi-protocol streaming solutions gaining popularity. Solace is one among them that actually provides a multi-protocol message broker. RabbitMQ, and open source strong contenter who actually also provides streaming across various protocols. So that's all from my side. If you have any questions, I'm all yours. So over to you.
Okay, Franklin, thank you so much for sharing about the APIs like synchronous and event-driven APIs and how both of the things works. Like we're sharing about the different various kind of protocols, like multi protocols and things. So
Sure.
one of the audience, like people from the audience, have a question like, what kind of challenges that you may face when you implement the event-driven architecture with the existing synchronous architecture, like when you are going to uh, use more than one style of APIs, what are some of the challenges that you may face in terms of architecture, in terms of design pattern, in terms of developer collaboration?
Yeah. Okay. So, Shreya, the first thing that I would say is actually, educating the whole approach of having an event-driven architecture within your folks in your team, and then, evangelizing the event-driven architecture across teams, conducting workshops within your organization, and explaining to them the value that would generate out of, an event-driven architecture ground up. But that's not to shy away from the fact that there are going to be challenges. The fact that the typical request reply approach is more easier for us to comprehend when it comes to actually as a developer to implement, and
Yeah.
therefore it is human to actually build solutions around that, and that's nothing wrong in it. You can actually do that, but event driven gives you a different paradigm, a whole different world when it comes to actually squeezing in out the performance that you want. So yes, there are challenges, and when it comes to challenges, it's the first and the most important thing that I can think of is actually to troubleshoot an issue. Actually, a typical request reply approach makes it very easy to troubleshoot a problem, but when it comes to a asynchronous mode, it's challenging. But nevertheless, there are ways to get around it. There is the open telemetry project that is taking place, where in which you can have your events being emitted at every stage in your ecosystem, right from the start, the point where the event is actually produced, till the point the event is actually consumed, and stitching those things together using projects like OpenTelemetry, and projects that actually trace these logs make it quite simple. And it's not a problem that has not been addressed when it comes to the microservices world, where you have typical microservices speaking to each other without even an event broker or an event hub in between. You have these same kind of problems. It's just that now you have
Yes.
some mediator in between to address or support you, but you can still get around them. Another thing is security. Security in the case of APIs has become very mature. The request reply applications have a very secure and mature model of operation. But in the asynchronous space, they are still tapping into auth, and the basic authentication means are there, but it's still taking its time to get traction and adoption. But nevertheless, I would say to start off with evangelizing and educating your team about the need for it, and from there, I think it should
Yeah.
go through.
Okay. Nice thoughts. Great learning from this session. And thank you
Sure,
very much,
anytime.
Franklin, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure's mine.